Hi, welcome back to Everything I've Never Said After What Feels Like Years. I am Lakshata and I'm gonna talk about the internet today, yet again, because it's fun, and unfortunately, what I do for most of my time is wasted on the internet. And even though I'm not very proud of it, it is reality. Today I'm going to talk about how we have normalized maybe some stuff that shouldn't be normalized, that is extremely wrong, and it shouldn't have the platform that it very unfortunately does. Starting off with just simple aesthetics and the romanticization of life and everything about it, moving on to something more intense like the fetishization of pain, ending the episode with the unfair normalization of misinformation and sharenting. I'm going to start off with aesthetics. So, an aesthetic is basically the thematic representation of certain types of art, apparel, or lifestyle. Some of the most common ones I keep coming across are cottagecore, dreamcore, and I don't know, soft softcore. I think that's a song. But yeah, basically any word with core at the end of it because there's like 50 of these dropping by the minute. And that is because every individual has their own perception of an aesthetic that does not go along with other people's perception of the same aesthetic. So they just give it a new name, and that is why there's a billion aesthetics but only 4 or 5 main ones. Moving on, now, with aesthetics, there's the romanticization of life, which is basically presenting your life in a very aesthetic way through short videos or long videos, vlogs, or just other forms of visual media. And the romanticization of life is a trend that's been going around the internet for quite a while. Now, along with unplugged background tunes, frequent ASMR elements, and toned down pale video filters, there's also one very recurring theme in these videos or just this sub trend of the internet, and that is perfection. The lives of people featuring in these vlogs is plain, it's predictable, it's simple, it's short, it's just calm and quiet. And on the face value, they seem to enjoy everything from drinking tea at like 4:45 in the morning to working all day. And it's not a bad thing. If that is your reality, if you have a great, simple, fulfilling life, then that's more than what many people could possibly wish for. Except that this is not reality. As someone who wakes up at 12 noon on a weekend and spends most days doing stupid, unproductive shit, this isn't exactly the type of stuff that I find relatable, and it sure definitely is. Sure, definitely. It is the stuff that I wish I could relate to or resonate with because this is the type of life that most people want. And there's not one thing wrong with that, right? I want to be goal oriented and I want to be in touch with my emotions and routines. I want to have time for every individual hobby and goal that I have every single day. And I want to also have the energy to do it. However, when such ideals are presented as reality for everyone, when they are clearly not, we may forget that everybody just lives imperfect lives where everything just doesn't automatically fall into symmetry and every day is different and it's unpredictable. And in such variability and unpredictability and often occasional stressors, finding something to romanticize is not easy. And there's nothing wrong with that. You cannot be happy doing every single thing that you do, even if that's important, even if it's something that's benefiting you. You may or may not enjoy doing it. The expectation to find joy in everything you do is spread and, in fact, started by rich influencers who live in gated communities and make content for a living. To present their lives as interesting, simple, and idealistic is what their job is. Like, of course, recording your life and putting it online is what you are getting paid for. So you're gonna be efficient at it. But what about somebody who's working 9 to 5? Do you really think that you will have the time and energy at 10:30 p.m. after a long day of working to have a whole ass night routine? You will not. And there's nothing wrong with that. Even if you do, that's a great thing. And even if you don't, that does not clearly mean that you are not living life right. Some people being me, well, tend to feel like this is just how we're supposed to be and this is just how we're supposed to live. But the discrepancy in people's lives and contexts and situations will also inevitably lead to discrepancies in their life. I think it's still really cool that some people can do it and some people have the capabilities to do it and the resources to do it. But I just wish that this was less of something that's expected of you and more of just an element you add to your life. And this would be much, much easier if some of the content creators would just for once focus on being realer and raw instead of putting up a fake ideal of what normal everyday lives are like. Moving on, quite on the contrary, I'm going to also talk about the fetishization of anger, pain, and sadness, especially in the lives of females. As weird as it is that there are literally aesthetics like sad girl, and there's terms like feminine rage, and sometimes even clinical insanity is represented as a usual quirk, which it clearly isn't. All of this is not just ignorant, but it's also literally tons of people on the internet that are getting exposed to this content, actively normalizing very, very not okay stuff like cheating and infidelity along with stalker behavior. And I do realize that most of these things are done with humorous or sarcastic intentions and they're just mere jokes. And not everything is that serious, like, get over it. We need to realize that the over representation of such negative patterns and behaviors can and very much does, in fact, normalize and encourage people to just believe that if this is unserious enough to be toyed around with so much or to be joked around with so much, it might as well be morally correct. So we unintentionally even normalize stuff like violence, stalking, cheating, out of hand behavior, and we also represent as in like, immoral or incorrect or irrational behavior as something that is not a cause of concern. When we specifically talk about the romanticization of being sad, I am talking the actual upholding of pain as something that it is seen as feminine and desirable. We are talking aesthetics, Pinterest pages, music, and whatnot. The internet has many, many other big players on it that profit off of this misrepresentation of pain to a point where they are straight up romanticizing it or normalizing it. And I'm not saying that experiencing sadness or pain or any negative emotion isn't normal. It's just not as Lana Del Rey coquette aesthetic as the internet might make it seem like. There's TV shows that represent ecstasy and addiction and spiraling into dark and mysterious, issues as something that is so cool and so grown up. And it puts forth the wrong idea. Because these things are not as pretty for the people who have to go through them. And even worse for the ones who are struggling to manage these. With being ignorant, these ideals and practices also normalize, to some extent, the idea of being addicted to inflicting harm upon yourself through your habits, physically, emotionally, in an abstract way even, or substance abuse. Because playing ultraviolence by Lana Del Rey in the background makes it seem like it's oh so cool and quirky. And it's not. Because if you see sadness in reality, it's not mysterious and it's not boss behavior, as some of the terms that I have seen as being associated with pain. It is genuinely demoralizing and difficult to deal with. And moreover, we also have the extensive representation of female rage in movies and in visual media, which is a great thing because it's been a long time since women have gotten the platform to express their possible rage openly because, as we know, it's seen as something that's incorrect and immoral. So, when female rage is portrayed in movies, it's often limited, and the representation of actual genuine rage, it's kind of confirmed to a woman who's done with everything around her and she's screaming and breaking things and there's tears rolling down her face. Which can be a very accurate representation of rage in some cases, these things are also viewed as symbol of strength, where what they actually are signs of burning out to a point where you cannot endure anything around yourself properly. Because people who have struggled with anger issues or just have been with somebody who struggled with anger issues just know that to get to a point where this is seen as normal, you have to previously endure a lot of other stuff. And moreover, rage is a lot more than that, because rage can be subtle, it can go unnoticed at times. The constant fetishization of these trivial and often hard to deal with emotions make them seem desirable and cool. And this is why visual media has a lot of power, because it can make addiction seem like something that makes you mysterious, but at the same time it can also pose the real impact of addiction on you and your life. And there have been examples of both. There's visual media that presents addiction as something that you can just make fetish content with, but there are also examples of media that present addiction as something that is actually a dangerous thing that will actually make you realize that this is not as cool as it may seem to you. And this harms your general outlook of how you should deal with issues like crippling pain and sadness, or rage, or addiction. Because you tend to mirror, especially if you're somebody who's new to these concepts, you may tend to mirror what you see on visual shows and TV shows and media, because that is how your perception of the world around you is formed. And that is why I believe that it's so important for the people who are behind creating such content to realize that they have a lot of power in deciding how these things are going to be perceived by such a huge amount of people. And another thing that we have normalized too much is misinformation. Since anyone with a platform can just come up and talk their shit and leave without having to prove that they are qualified to talk whatever they talk about in any way or form, we have been rained on with information that we either believe because it's too alien of a topic for us to want to see about for ourselves, or just something that we already have apprehensions about. One of the biggest things about the internet is that everybody just seems to come from a place of trust and security and qualification, or at least everyone can act like they do. And we tend to take the word of some doctor on the internet or someone who claims to be a life coach. And while I'm not saying that they're all liars and fraudsters, there definitely are some genuine people hoping to give out some genuine advice on the internet about some issues that you may not be very well aware of, and that's a commendable thing to do. The thing with medical misinformation is that the doctors that you may or may not rely on the internet, they lack necessary context. They lack necessary context, and they lack history, and they lack the basic background info that they need to give any insight on what you may be struggling with. And I think misinformation about health is the single most dangerous type of misinformation out there, because it's literally something that has the power to affect people's lives. And not only do we have people using these platforms that are not educated enough to differentiate what's different and what's true from what's not, but also hypochondriacs and also people who tend to self-diagnose. And people can create content about illness information and illness prevention, sure. But how far can we really go, and where's the limit to what you can post about public health online is something that we have completely never set a boundary on. At the same time, I do think there's a silver lining to this, because people who struggle with some mental or physical illnesses can come up and talk about their experience, and somebody else who may struggle with the same thing can go and resonate with them. And they may end up destigmatizing a lot of stuff that other people did not talk about before, and that just creates a freer conversation for debate. And some people might just come across one of these videos and go get a check done because they might find something that they think they might be struggling with, and they might get a diagnosis that can save them. But there is a side to health and wellness creation that continues to be largely impacted by contextual and cultural differences as well. The differences in the way we live life pan regions can cause our daily practices to vary by a landslide. But this medical content is available across the world and it's available to everyone. And people who do come across it, thanks to the algorithm, may have no regional roots to the terminology and the practice of these professionals. And even when it comes to doctors or any sort of professional in any field, there is a very noticeable vast difference between their practice from one country to another. And aside from the basic fumbling of psychological facts or the misuse of the term psychology to prove literally whatever bias shit you wish to, there's many sub-trends that keep emerging from time to time, like girl facts and feminine and masculine urges, or audios or pranks. The issue here that arises is that people present personal opinions as factual statements. And to the brain of a naive internet user who's just here to have a good day, all of these misguided fact givers may just be right. To garner a viewership that's bigger than one can manage is what may just cause the process of creating to be more calculated than natural, the way it should be. And people will stick to promoting and making stuff that their viewers like or seem to react to more positively. And that's where sharenting comes into picture. Because plastering yourself all over social media isn't bad enough. You have to do that to your child too. Now, sharenting is basically the practice of sharing too much of your children's lives online through videos and pictures, especially without their knowledge or consent. I do get that people may do this to create a decorum for motherhood or parenting and talk about their experiences and hardships or teaching people how to do certain stuff. But the thing is that all of this can pretty much be done without putting your child's face online, and this is something which most people seem to miss. And there's also a huge amount of people who are into sharenting solely for profiting off their kids' lives, which is just as bad. And we definitely have normalized family channels to an extent where a parent picking up a camera to film their child crying, going through something negative and difficult, isn't even frowned upon. Whereas, hello, it's really damaging and it's very wrong. And to use your children as an income source at an age where most of them can barely walk or talk or analyze the world around them is number one, unsafe, and number two, very Freudian. There have been instances of people selling pictures of their children to complete strangers online, and people deliberately using their children to create content that they know is being pushed to the wrong demographic of social media users. And the problem arises when a parent who actively knows the extent to which sharenting can possibly decimate their children's lives continues to make such exploitative content. And sometimes it is solely to cater to the needs of the people with, let's just say, hostile intentions. Yes, that happens. So, to grow up and to see that most of your life has been put up for the world's viewing pleasure, including your life's vulnerable moments and embarrassing things that you did as a child, is extremely damaging to these children who may or may not have gained the sensibility to realize the consequences, but also to the ones who will realize it at some point and they are still victims or they are still too young or naive to understand. So, when we look at the bigger picture, internet is a culture. It's not just an element of our lives anymore, it is our life. And there's not just positive stuff that we may have normalized, but we have also desensitized people to a lot of stuff. Because we take things at their face value as what we see, and what we may not see or what may be behind the scenes is something that we forget to take into consideration. And since there isn't any way to possibly escape misinformation or sharenting or unnecessary expectations of romanticization or fetishization, there is, however, the option to just get off of social media for some time and unplug yourself and see that real life is not this coordinated or not run by an algorithm. I need to take that advice on my own too, but like, yeah. So, yeah, this is it for today. I am so happy that I finally completed this episode after deleting like 15 drafts of the topics that I hated or had no idea what to say about. I will try to talk about the internet less, but today is not the day. I will try to talk about the internet less. I hope you enjoyed listening. This was Lakshata, and I'll see you soon. Love you. Bye.